Hello everyone, this is Shannon from That's So Po, and today I'm doing week 25 of my 2022 reads. This week I read a bunch of short things, all of which were pretty interesting for various reasons. Timestamps and content warnings are in the description box below. First, I finished The Silence of the Wilting Skin by Tlotlo Tsamaase, who is a Botswana author, and I believe this is their debut novella. So I have read some of their work in some short story collections and was pretty intrigued because they just have this really poetic sense of writing and very surreal style as well. So I picked up this novella. I'd been meaning to get to it for a while, and it was exactly what I was expecting of their writing. Just really lush writing, very, very poetic. I would say that this novella almost veers more into poetry than it does into prose, especially in terms of the imagery and the surreal nature of the story. So as best as I can put together, this novella is about a woman who lives in this sort of almost futuristic society where the others are very much taking over her neighborhood. And in particular, they're trying to take their homes and also to destroy these train tracks on which a train runs that only the people in the neighborhood can see, where sort of the spirits of their dead loved ones go, and they live on this train, but the others can't see this. And so she's sort of fighting for that, but also dealing with a lot of other things going on. This story, I feel, is a little hard to grasp. It's really like a fever dream as you're reading it. You don't kind of understand where you are from one moment to the next, but it is beautifully written. I love just the way that the words are put together, and it has so many layers of political meaning. So there's so much in this that is anti-colonialist and that is just talking about identity. There's all of these things like her losing her language, right? Where the others are keeping her from being able to speak, to use her words. There's stuff where the color of her skin is falling off. There's stuff where, when they look in mirrors, they can't see themselves as they actually are because they're reflected through the other. And it's just there's so much messaging in here, really good social commentary, but it is rather hard to follow. So I was lost for a good portion of it, but I still think this was absolutely fascinating. So if you have a high tolerance for kind of surreal abstract work, I think this is a really cool thing to pick up. Also, if you liked things like Riot Baby by Tochio Nobuchi, I feel like this is slightly more extreme than that, but it has that same feel of, that there's a lot of meaning, but you may not always grasp exactly what it is. So yeah, I gave this 3.5 out of 5 stars, but I'd be very interested in picking up more of their work. Next, I read Golden Girl by Reem Faruqi. This is a contemporary middle grade in verse that I absolutely loved. This was so good. So this is basically about a girl who is struggling with a couple of things in her life. And in particular, she's struggling with some kleptomania. So she keeps taking things, even though she kind of keeps telling herself not to, but she can't resist taking them. At the same time, her dad, who works for some airlines, has been detained in Dubai under suspicion of embezzlement. Even though he was actually there to go and handle somebody else who was doing the embezzling, he got blamed for it. And so she and her family are just struggling because her dad is not there, and she's struggling because she has this issue. And her grandfather, who has cancer, has come to stay with them from Pakistan in order to get some treatment. And so she's dealing with a lot of different things. And this is just beautifully written. I loved the verse. I loved the character. I loved the way that she's working through all of these different issues in her life. This was just an absolutely fantastic example of all the ways contemporary middle grade can address really big issues, but in a way that is just so age appropriate. I absolutely loved this, and I would give it 5 out of 5 stars and highly recommend it. Next, I finished A Very Beery New Year by Jackie Lau. This is number 3.5 in her contemporary romance series, The Cider Bar Sisters. And this is just such a sweet novella. So this is basically a friends to lovers story that takes place over quite a while, a year, year and a half. And I think that Jackie Lau did such a great job with this. Often romance novellas are a little difficult because you're trying to fit a full relationship into a very short span of time, page-wise. But here I think that it was done so well because it was just the story of these two characters becoming friends. So the heroine in this is a bartender, and the hero is a guy who's very kind of shy and antisocial, but he comes in once a week to read his book in the bar. But they end up striking up a conversation over time that develops into a friendship and then into a little bit more. And it was just the sweetest story, and it has all of the great things I love about Jackie Lau's writing. Excellent food, really funny family members, and just really sweet characters. This is also a very low heat romance novella, which I thought worked perfectly for the length because it's all about them just coming together. And I think that also if you are somebody who's been wanting to try her work, or if you've been wanting to try some romance but you don't want to jump in on the deep end on the steamy scenes, this is such a great one to pick up. And even though it's kind of in the middle of her series, I think it stands alone. You don't really need to read the other ones. It was just so sweet. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. And this is also a free ebook if you sign up for her newsletter, so definitely recommend it. Then I read Surpassing Certainty by Janet Mock on audio, which I definitely recommend. I love memoirs on audio, and Janet Mock's narration of this was perfect. I had read her first memoir, Redefining Realness, a couple of years ago, and then recently Fraser at Fraser Simon Springboard Thought, who I'll link below, read Redefining Realness, and it reminded me that I still wanted to get to her second memoir. So I picked this up, and it was just such a joy to read. Basically, whereas the first memoir is focusing on her childhood, coming into age, and her kind of transition into womanhood, this book is focusing on her adulthood, focusing on her going to college, her first marriage, focusing on her getting into the magazine publishing industry, and especially focusing on a lot of things that the first book didn't. So whereas her first memoir was a lot about transness, this book especially is about being a Black woman in very white spaces, and also about coming to terms with sort of your own issues and your own relationships. You know, she goes through therapy and she really comes to terms with a lot of stuff in her life. It's so reflective and just a really, really beautiful story. I like hearing her talk too, so that was just enjoyable. At times there was a little bit of drama in her life, and that was a little stressful for me to listen to, especially because she narrated it perfectly. But other than that, I just really thoroughly enjoyed it. Definitely would recommend, and I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. And then lastly, I read Across the Tracks by Alverne, illustrated by Stacey Robinson. This is a graphic nonfiction that I'd heard about from Cynthia at Book Whimsy, who I'll link below. Cynthia always has the best nonfiction recommendations, and I was really interested in this one because it's the story of Greenwood, Tulsa, otherwise known as Black Wall Street. And this is something that I'd heard about and I'd wanted to read a little bit more of, and I love graphic nonfiction. So this basically talks mainly just about how vibrant of a community Greenwood was, talks about all the different people who moved there and all the different businesses they started, and the way that they created this sort of utopian society for Black people in the 1910s, 1920s, and then how white rioters basically destroyed it in 1921. And I didn't even realize things like an airstrike was called down upon Greenwood and it was bombed. So the extent to which this was state sanctioned, I hadn't quite realized. But yes, it was a lot of really interesting information. The illustration itself was maybe a little bit more kind of superhero comic book style than I prefer. But even so, I thought it was really interesting just learning more about Greenwood and the people there and all the things that they had done. There was also at the end a very academic essay talking about the history of the region really, and talking also a lot about the indigenous communities who were there or who were relocated there, and just a lot of the kind of racial tensions and issues there. So I thought that both of these were great, although the comic section was a little simple and the academic essay at the end was quite academic in its tone. So I kind of wish that some of the details from that academic essay had been integrated into the comic book section, and that the academic essay had been just a little bit more approachable as a reader. But even so, this is a very, very slim volume, and it was just really interesting history. So I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Okay, so that's everything that I read this week. If you guys have read any of these, or if you're interested in reading them, if you have any thoughts, or if you have any recommendations for graphic nonfiction, I love graphic nonfiction, definitely let me know, or just let me know what you've been reading this week. Just leave me a comment down below.